The 10 of them had been friends since college, a bond forged in lecture halls and cheap bars, now tested annually by a pilgrimage into the wilderness. This year, it was the Blacktooth Range, a jagged spine of granite and pine so remote that the trails on the map were little more than suggestions. Their laughter echoed too brightly in the vast, silent cathedrals of old-growth forest, a fragile human sound against the primordial hush. It was Leo, the group's self-appointed navigator, who found the cave. It wasn't on any map. A fissure in the mountainside, hidden behind a curtain of thorny brush, exhaling a breath of air so cold it made their teeth ache, even in the late summer sun. A strange rhythmic clicking, like two stones being tapped together deep within the earth, pulsed from the darkness. Against the uneasy protests of a few Curiosity 1, they ventured inside. The cave narrowed into a chamber, its walls streaked with a phosphorescent fungus that cast a sickly green light. And in the center, nestled in a depression of packed earth and bonesome animal. Some disconcertingly long and human-like was a clutch of eggs. They were grotesque, larger than ostrich eggs. Their shells were a mottled gray and black, leathery and cold to the touch. A faint coppery smell like old blood clung to them. "We can't eat those," Sarah said, her voice small in the oppressive silence. Jake, ever the joker, ever the one to push boundaries, scoffed. "Why not? Extreme cuisine, story to tell." He gathered 3 of them into his backpack, ignoring the way they seemed to pulse faintly against the fabric. The clicking from the depths of the cave intensified, becoming a frantic, chattering rage that followed them out. That night at their campsite by a glacial lake, Jake made good on his promise. While the others built a fire, he cracked the leathery shells. The contents were a viscous black fluid shot through with threads of silver. It smelled of spoiled meat and ozone. He scrambled them in a pan with their last precious butter, a perverse omelet sizzling over the fire. Most refused, but Jake, along with the ever-impressionable Mark and the defiant Chloe, ate it. They choked it down with forced laughter and swigs of whiskey, their faces pale and sweating, tasted of grave soil and static. The change began that night. First, the forest around them fell utterly silent. No crickets, no wind, nothing. The only sound was the frantic beating of their own hearts. Then, a long, guttural howl ripped through the darkness. It was not a wolf, not a bear. It was a sound of pure, intelligent hunger, a vocalization that seemed to freeze the blood in their veins. It echoed from the peaks above them, then, impossibly fast, from the tree line directly across the lake. The hunt had begun. They broke camp at first light, abandoning tents and supplies in a blind panic. They ran, not on a trail, but downhill, driven by a primal need to escape. The thing the Wendigo was hurting them. They would catch glimpses of it, a gaunt, skeletal figure, impossibly tall, its antlered head scraping the lower branches of the pines, moving with a speed that defied physics. Its eyes burned with a pale corpse-light hunger. By the second day, Mark was gone. He'd been lagging, complaining of a terrible coldness in his bones. One moment he was there, the next a shriek was cut short by a wet, tearing sound. They found only his shredded backpack and a single bloodied hiking boot. The real horror, however, was unfolding within their own ranks. Chloe began to change. It started subtly, a new sharpness to her canines. A constant, low-grade shiver she blamed on the cold, though her skin was burning to the touch. Her eyes became hypersensitive to light, the pupils contracting to pinpricks, even in the deep forest gloom. Her hunger became a ravenous, all-consuming thing. She devoured their remaining rations, energy bars, beef jerky, but it was not enough. She stared at the others with a look that was no longer fully human, a look of raw, predatory assessment. "It's the eggs," Sarah whispered to Leo, her voice trembling. "The legend. You eat its food, you become its kind." They tried to keep their distance from Chloe, but they were trapped together in this nightmare. On the 3rd day, as they forded an icy river, Ben slipped on a mossy rock. Chloe was on him in an instant. It wasn't an attack of malice, but of instinct, now unhinging like a snake's, clamped down on his shoulder. The sound of crunching bone was deafening. Ben's screams were choked off as she shook him like a rag doll, her strength monstrous. By the time Leo pulled her off with a terrified yell, Ben was dead, his throat torn out. Chloe scrambled back, her mouth and chin dripping red. She looked at her hands, at the blood, and let out a wail that was half human sob, half the same predatory shriek that had been hunting them. Then she turned and fled into the trees on all fours, her movements now a grotesque, loping gallop. Now there were 2. The remaining 7, Leo, Sarah, Jake, and 4 others were truly damned. They were hunted by the original horror from the mountain, and by the monster they had created, the friend they had laughed with days before. The 2 Wendigos worked in a terrifying tandem. The ancient one was a strategist, using the land itself as a weapon, driving them towards cliffs and deadfalls. Chloe was the relentless tracker, her newfound senses homing in on their fear scent. She knew their patterns, their weaknesses. One by one, they fell. Jake, the architect of their doom, was the last to go before the final 2. He had fallen into a state of catatonic shock, muttering about the omelet. Chloe came for him at dusk. She didn't kill him quickly. She played with him, a cat with a mouse, her former friend's terror a delicacy. Leo and Sarah, hiding in a thicket, listened to his final gurgling pleas, their own tears freezing on their cheeks. Now, only Leo and Sarah remained. They clung to each other in the hollow of a rotten log, their bodies numb with cold and terror. The moon was high, illuminating a small clearing. Could hear both of them now, the heavy rhythmic crack of the Ancient One's footsteps, and the lighter skittering pace of Chloe, circling, always circling. "I'm not going to be food," Sarah whispered, her breath a ghost in the frigid air. She looked at Leo, her eyes filled with a heartbreaking mix of love and finality. "And I'm not going to become that." Before Leo could stop her, she broke from the cover and ran into the center of the moonlit clearing. She stood there, a small, defiant figure, and screamed into the forest, "Chloe, I'm here!" The skittering stopped. Then Chloe emerged from the tree line. She was barely recognizable. Her limbs had elongated, her skin pulled taut over a framework of jutting bone. Her face was a horrifying mask of her former beauty, twisted by an insatiable hunger. She tilted her head, a gesture that was so uniquely Chloe it made Leo's heart shatter. Sarah didn't run. She closed her eyes. Chloe lunged. It was over in seconds. Leo didn't wait. He ran. He ran as the ancient Wendigo stepped into the clearing, its massive form blocking the moon. He didn't look back. He heard no sounds of a struggle between the 2 monsters. They were of the same kind now. There was no conflict, only a shared, infinite hunger. He stumbled out of the tree line hours later, onto a remote forestry service road, his clothes in tatters, his mind broken. He was found by a ranger and taken to a hospital, where he babbled about caves and eggs and his friends turning into monsters. They called it exposure-induced psychosis, a tragic hiking accident. But sometimes, late at night, Leo sits by his window and looks towards the dark line of the Blacktooth Range on the horizon. And on the wind, he can sometimes hear it 2 distinct harmonizing howls. One ancient and cold, the other newer, born from a campfire joke and a shared meal, a duet of eternal, ravenous hunger. And he knows with a certainty that keeps him forever awake that the hunt never really ends. It only waits for new friends to wander off the trail.